I am Jonathan Whitcomb. It is August 14th, 2023. We're going to continue with this sighting that's mentioned in this huge web page, critical page, which is full of confirmation error, other cognitive biases probably. That was written by the man I call KGCB, this critic who's so skeptical and devoted to trying to disprove modern pterosaurs. I'll quote from my book, Live Pterosaurs in America, third edition, quote, "We were walking down near the boatyards heading home," unquote. This is from Patty Carson, the child eyewitness in 1965 or thereabouts, and she was about 5 or 6 years old. Quote, "We lived at the end of the road, last house by the radio tower. We were walking from the boatyards towards home, but still closer to the boatyards. To where it was sandy underfoot, sparse scrub vegetation around 4 feet high. Smelled like tar from the boatyard and sulfur from the sandy flats. There were some stagnant pools here and there a few inches deep. Suddenly, it sat up as if it had been eating something or resting. The head and upper part of its body, about a third of the wings at the joint, tips still held down, showed. It was about 2 o'clock position, right in front of us, about 30 feet away. All of us froze for about 5 seconds. Then it leaned to its left and took off with a whap, whap, whap sound. In a big hurry, more like a scramble. It flew to its left and disappeared behind trees and terrain," unquote. Let's get a little bit more details on this, because a lot of these details are missing from this big, giant web page. Quote, "It did have a tail and it had a diamond-shaped tip. Didn't get to see if it had hairs on it," meaning she couldn't tell if there were any hairs on the end of the tail of that creature. That's because the eyewitness Eskin Kun mentioned that he could discern hair on the end of the tail of the 2 flying creatures he saw a few years later. Patty Carson also said, quote, "It had little teeth, a lot of them," unquote. Now, what does the critic KGCB say on his huge webpage? Nothing about the eyewitness standing frozen for 5 seconds while staring at the strange creature that had many small teeth in his beak. Nothing about that. The critic asks us to doubt that a child could discern details of a creature that was only in her sight briefly. That webpage says nothing about those 5 seconds when those kids were staring at the creature before it began to fly. The webpage says nothing about it. You'd think from reading that webpage that, they suddenly saw the creature and it flew away quickly, and Patty Carson had no time to really discern all those things that she said she remembers. Nonsense. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. There was time for her to stare at the creature and take in a lot of things while the animal was looking around and trying to figure out what was going on before it began to fly away. And then, of course, once it started flying, it took off and disappeared very quickly, a very rapid flight. But you never know that kind of thing from reading that webpage. Boy. It says nothing about those 5 seconds, and it's just, don't even bother looking at that web page. It's just full of confirmation errors, probably other cognitive biases too. But just ignore it. If you ever see it, you'll know it. It has many, many thousands of words, and it's just all negative about the possibility of modern pterosaurs. Thank you.